evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you from the conclusion of the race in Gateway and quite frankly, pretty crazy weekend in general, which is a term I think that we could apply to a lot of these races, but especially this weekend with the action on a very rainy Portland track and a very ultimately controversial Gateway track, I guess you could say. Unofficially, your race winner today, Joey Logano, scoring another victory on a new venue to the circuit. Pulled off the victory at the Busch Clash at the Coliseum earlier this year, and of course his other points race win at Darlington, where he bumped William Byron out of the way. This time around, a crazy bit of an exchange for the lead in overtime caused by a rather scary incident by Kevin Harvick with a brake failure going into turn 3. Forces the race to go into yet another green-white checkered finish. Kyle Busch seemed to have the best car, although he was very loose. We ended up having a series of crossover moves on this track at the end, and Joey Logano ultimately prevailing after Kyle broke loose at one end of the track there. Good way to finish off the weekend there with the battle for the win there. And Joey Logano now is the latest driver to join the group of increasing number of drivers with 2 wins this season. But all of this very secondary to what happened very early in the race. Not so much our last place battle, but very much the story of Ross Chastain. Chastain very apologetic in his post-race interview, taking full responsibility for a pair of incidents. Of course, very early on in the race, he and Denny Hamlin came together in turns 1 and 2. Seemed like the closing rate either wasn't able to make the adjustment right, or Hamlin checked up. It looked like Chastain slowed up a little bit, but regardless, the result was the same. Hamlin skated up the track, slammed the outside wall at the right rear of his car, and only very quick repairs by the Joe Gibbs Racing crew were able to replace that all too fragile toe link in the right rear of the car, get him back out there. Ultimately was about 10 laps down midway through the race, but was very much not happy with Chastain, as understandable as that is. But we saw some pretty brazen blocks that Hamlin was throwing at that point, holding up Ross Chastain on the back straightaway, at one point chasing him to the grass. A couple other times where it looked like they're going to keep Chastain from actually reaching minimum speed, and Hamlin just throwing blocks out there. But at the same time, still kind of had a situation where it wasn't going to stay that way either. Ultimately, had another incident. Ross Chastain tangles with Chase Elliott coming off turn 4. Elliott ends up in a spin. Thankfully, doesn't get very much damage. Thankfully for him, that is. Aside from a little bit of contact from Harrison Burton. But regardless, both these drivers looking to be contenders in the race, and neither of them ultimately being a factor in the finish of the event there. And then at one point, to the point where Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin are throwing blocks at Ross there. NASCAR taking a very surprisingly hands-off approach, at least from what I heard on the radio. At one point, they were warning Hamlin, but this is a ways into it after the incident there to kind of calm down. It seemed very clear that Hamlin was not going to be doing that. The crew was very much egging him on as well. The tweets that I was posting there were from the radio traffic saying basically, get a new tire on that car and then go out and go get him. And that seemed to be very much the strategy. And given that this was still a very short race, and this is still happening well after the first stage, you had a situation there where it was going to be potentially where we're going to see a Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano situation again, or are we going to see something different in that sense? But ultimately, we didn't see a wreck there, didn't see anything at the finish, at least from what they showed in the broadcast there. But, Ross Chastain, I thought, I saw Eric Eastep make a post about this, and I tend to agree with him there that, I think, okay, Ross was very apologetic about it. I know words aren't going to make up for a poor run, lost points, or perhaps a situation where a driver could improve their position in the championship this season. But regardless, I thought, Chastain was very upfront on that. I think he seemed contrite enough in his interview, but I thought really Ross was going too far in his apology. I think, it was just racing, and he made a lot of mistakes. He made at least a couple there in those, but I think he wasn't the only driver that was making mistakes out there. We saw a lot of close calls with people trying to make 3 wide moves and be over aggressive there in this race, and didn't quite work out. Just seemed like the camera was focused on him more than anything else. Now, earlier in the race, of course, there were a couple incidents where Chastain was very aggressive. In the first 10 or 20 laps there, he was making some absolutely huge dive bombs in that, but it was actually working for him, and he didn't seem to actually wreck anybody out of the way. He was just able to just kind of make those aggressive moves work, and unfortunately, things just kind of got out of hand from there. And I know he's the driver behind the wheel, and he's accountable for what he's doing out there. But I don't think this quite reached the level of something like I'd seen out of even earlier parts of Chastain's career. I think there was much more furor out of him at the Daytona 500, where he triggered a massive wreck in turn one by just doing a crazy move on the inside there. Back when he was driving for Spire Motorsports, seemed like he had a couple other incidents like that earlier in his career. We haven't seen as much out of that this year. That hasn't been, actually going for a win. We've seen him just improve that much more. I didn't think this went to the level of something like Ernie Irvan, who back in 1991 was involved in a series of accidents driving for Morgan McClure, to the point that he had to make a very public apology at the Talladega Superspeedway in July of that year, saying that he felt that he lost the respect of a lot of drivers out there. Guys like Rusty Wallace saying, "Look, if I'm going to wreck you if you try to do something like that again." I don't think we had something like this. I think having it all happen in one race is a little bit extreme. But I know people are going to have a lot of opinions about it, and I'm already seeing some of that showing up here in the chat there, and we'll certainly talk about that there too. I think Chastain was, I was this more aggressive than, say, what Brian Vickers did in 2011 at Martinsville, where he was just willy-nilly just wrecking people left and right, including championship contenders at the time, like Matt Kenseth. I don't think it was anything to that degree, and I don't think nearly as much attention was given to Vickers during that exchange, simply because he wasn't a championship contender at the time. No, I mean, I've seen much more aggressive things than what we saw in this race today. These are just a couple of unfortunate situations. I do think it looked like he slowed down before the Hamlin one. It's unfortunate that things turned out that way and it took Hamlin out of the race. The Chase Elliott one, again, it could have been way worse than it turned out to be. You look at some of the old Ernie Irvan clips, whether it's a 1992 Daytona 500 triggering a massive wreck down the back straightaway or a huge pileup off of turn 3 at Pocono. Things were really pretty tense back then. That was back when I was just kind of getting back into the sport. But the first exposure that we had to Swerve and Irvin back then was as a guy that was just kind of a loose cannon. Had accidents that really were catastrophic for a lot of drivers. Neil Bonnet's accident in 1990 at Darlington certainly comes to mind. You don't want to put it all on one driver, but again, this was kind of mentioned of Tony Stewart by Darrell Waltrip years later, talking about a driver that's a common denominator. But again, yeah, I think this is, I think the kind of aggression that we see in this race is going to be something that's going to be something that you're going to see a lot of. And I think the network was definitely looking at Ross a lot more, waiting to see if something was going to be happening. I think they could have just kept the camera on him for the entire rest of the race. They almost were at some point there. But, again, I'll be interested to see what happens. We got Sears Point next week, and the Trackhouse team, I'm sure, will be still in the mix there. Is something going to happen that next week or not? I don't know. But it's going to be something that I'm sure is going to be a big story as we go into this weekend's coverage trackside at the track at the Sonoma Raceway coming up here. So, I think that, again, controversy is something that's always going to be a part of it. You're always going to have drivers that are perceived to be more aggressive than anybody else. I think Logano has already got plenty of attention from that in his career. And then him winning this race, I think, has kind of blurred that distinction a little bit. But even then, from Logano, we saw very clean racing, I think, out of him, certainly compared to Darlington, where he and Kyle Busch were just trading moves there, and one just outfoxed the other, and to the victor go the spoils there. So I hope Ross doesn't get too hard on himself there, but again, whatever is happening is happening. I think at some point, you also got to you take responsibility for actions, but at the same time, you don't just completely bury yourself, entirely and just be like, oh man, it's coming. They're gonna come back and they're gonna get me. It's like, look, it'll happen or it doesn't. And again, the words aren't going to be enough to calm anybody one way or the other. So I don't know. It's a different situation. We'll see what happens. Let me get into the super chats here. Thank you so much for these messages here. Let me make sure I jump into these here offhand. The Beast of Metal, I know you were very outspoken in the lead into the chat here, and it looks like you posted this here as well. Not sure I've seen a driver go from endearing to arrogant as quickly as Chastain. A post-race interview is going to go down as one of the all-time great acting jobs in the motorsports world. On track speaks louder. A very good point. I mean, again, as I said, words are just words. They're not going to undo what was done out there, what happened. Again, I do think, and I think especially in, the social media infused world has made this so much worse, no matter what your profession is, that I think there's no sense of scale anymore. Like, okay, we had a couple of unfortunate incidents here. I think the argument could be made that Denny Hamlin's response to it, throwing all those blocks out there, should raise as many eyebrows as possible. But it also brings up the fact that these drivers are able to police themselves. And I think NASCAR perhaps realized that as well by not, they were kind of seemed to be going through the motions in terms of trying to control Hamlin in any respect there. But Denny Hamlin, really in recent weeks, especially from what we've seen on the Dale Jr. download and his other interviews, I think he's just at a point where he's just going to just say what he's thinking, and he's not going to be too worried about it. I think his increased role as a team owner has really emboldened himself to kind of, let more people know what he's thinking and saying what he's feeling. And perhaps there's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder from all those incidents he had with Chase Elliott earlier in his career and all of his fans booing him and, yelling at him and stuff like that too. So you have kind of this situation between a couple of young talents, younger talent in terms of Chastain versus Hamlin that have just a strong opinion as anything else, and almost kind of stole the show from the rest of the leaders there at the same time there. Not sure how that's going to shake out. I mean, again, I'm not sure if I'm willing to say that it's like an acting job there. But yeah, I'm with you on that, Beast of Metal, that, yeah, what you're doing on the track is ultimately what people are going to be judging you by there. And that's going to be the bigger situation there. And yeah, is this going to be something we're going to see further ahead? I mean, obviously, again, you look further back, was the way that Ross Chastain won his first race over aggressive. Well, I mean, if you're an AJ Allmendinger fan or an Alex Bowman fan, yeah, you'd probably say that it was. But of course, him going for his first win, he's going to try to throw everything at it and try to pull that off too. And again, there have been other instances, but there have been other instances where Chastain has been very much the victim of over-aggression. I think back to Kevin Harvick in that Busch Series race at Darlington years ago. I believe it was 2018 when they were out on the backstretch, and Harvick shouldn't have even been in that race to begin with, and created an unnecessary situation there that took Chastain out of that one. He may be reaching the same situation that Joey Logano did years later after the fire suit in the family situation, where he now thinks like, okay, well, this is the way people are going to be racing me. You can't just roll over at the same time and just be like, oh, I made a terrible mistake, and they're going to be after me. I mean, why give them ideas? I think at some point, you own up to a mistake, but you don't give them any more munition and say, and all that at the same time. So again, I don't mean to ramble on too much about this, but I do think, he was going a little bit too far in berating himself at the end of this one. I think he had a situation where there was a lot of aggression overall this entire weekend, not just at Gateway, but also at Portland, of course, and we'll talk about that too. I think this is just kind of you just have some strong personalities out there that if they get roughed up by anybody, I think Logano's just happy the focus isn't on him. It seemed like we were having the same conversation after the Darlington race, so hard to say for sure. Joe Tremonte, thank you for your super chat as well. Starting watching NASCAR this year at the age of 41, knew nothing about NASCAR. I've become a huge Logano fan. At my first race, Texas, sadly, the guy next to me ranted about Joey for 25 minutes straight. It's so entertaining. Well, first of all, Joe, thank you for coming into the sport there, and I appreciate you spending some of your race day with me here on the show here tonight. I'm glad you've been getting into the sport. I think you picked a good time to get into it with the new car and a lot of these unpredictable aspects. I think we've had some drivers that have been on the cusp of winning and others that are entering the prime of their career at the same time. And that creates situations like what you did see today between Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin, and to an extent Ross Chastain and Chase Elliott there. I think we're seeing a return to some aggression at a time where these cars, except for those pesky toe links, are able to just put up with as much abuse as possible and see drivers climb back into contention again. I think that you're going to see some interesting storylines kind of build up organically from that. And I think that was very much a consequence of that today. And yeah, people that are not big Joey Logano fans, yeah, I mean, you're going to have some people that are, not going to be happy at that point. But that's the way the sport's always been. It's been that way when it was Dale Earnhardt or it was Rusty Wallace or Darrell Waltrip. Point to any one of those drivers out there, and at one point or another, they had a time where it seemed like the majority of the fan base just hated their guts. But there were other drivers, other fans out there that just loved them all the more for it. And I think you'll find a lot of camaraderie among the other Joey Logano fans there in that respect. I think today was a perfect example of just how much skill Logano has when he doesn't have to go out there and do something that wrecks somebody out of the lead or something like that. He's still a hell of a driver. And I think he was very happy that Ross Chastain has now suddenly put himself in the black hat role here to kind of drop him into that situation. As Beast of Metal said, I think this is what happens in a sport. Yeah, I think it could very easily be the big favorite out there, and then all of a sudden things turn around, and now all of a sudden you're public enemy number one, and maybe people are going to be looking at him differently at Sears Point than they would have coming into this race. The Darrell Waltrip, Rusty Wallace thing in 1989 is a perfect example of that. That Darrell Waltrip was a driver that, people didn't like his brash style. And all of a sudden, Rusty Wallace spins him out of the All-Star race. And all of a sudden, everybody's describing the same emotions to Rusty. And all of a sudden, Darrell Waltrip wins. I think he won Most Popular Driver that year. You could have a situation like that happen, maybe where Ross Chastain, people are just like starting to dogpile him on the track. And Joey Logano slips through, wins some more races, and all of a sudden Logano's the fan vote winner. You never know. It's not automatically ascribed to Chase Elliott, even though it kind of feels that way. But that's another thing you can kind of look at there too. But yeah, I think those are different drivers to kind of look at there too. But yeah, I think overall, I think in terms of the race itself, you had a bit of a sideshow with what was happening with Ross Chastain and Hamlin and all that, but I'm glad that it was allowed to kind of play itself out. It wasn't anything too dangerous. I think that NASCAR's had many examples of this over in the past. You obviously don't want it to get to a situation where things just explode, like a Jimmy Spencer, Kurt Busch thing, or, kind of what happened with Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski, where infamously Carl Edwards hooked Keselowski at Atlanta. And Keselowski had one of the worst accidents of his career, at least certainly in terms of the optics. I think that I think in NASCAR's role, they got to just look at this from one race to the next, and that'll be something again that'll be kind of interesting to see if they address at Sears Point going forward. I think we've certainly seen some vengeance played out at that track before, even within an event. But again, I think that Ross will probably talk to Hamlin. I'll be interested to see if anything comes up of it. And if we find out that nothing did happen, well, then that'll be a story itself too. But that'll be another thing to look at. Alex Averos, thank you for your super chat as well. I think Ross understanding the playoffs making guys like Denny and Chase mad is a bad idea. Also, we need to talk about Iwuji. Yes, we do. We absolutely need to talk about Jesse Iwuji, who made himself a story in his own right from what happened in Portland. But yeah, that's a very good point, Alex. I think certainly with the championship set up in such a way that a driver could be eliminated from an accident, not just eliminated from a race, but from a championship or even a shot at it. Probably Ross is looking at a way that, okay, look, I'll stack up as many wins as I can get, but I don't want to make a whole lot of enemies here in the summer stretch before we even get to August, September, and a shot at actually going for a championship. I mean, that's awfully far down the line, but these drivers do have long memories, and we see many examples of that. The Jimmy Spencer, Kurt Busch thing went from late 2001 all the way through 2003, and we have many other drivers who don't forget. That's very much been the situation there too. But again, I think for us viewers, I think it's entertaining. As long as it doesn't get too out of control, I think it's something that we can certainly look at there at the same time. Yeah, I think that's going to be certainly an interesting thing to look at going from there. Yeah, Waltrip may have won most popular driver, but Wallace won the cup. Very good point. Exactly. Sometimes success doesn't always come with popularity. And that's certainly been the case from some of the drivers that we've seen on the circuit so far. So unofficial results here: Joey Logano, your race winner over Kyle Busch. Kurt Busch in third. Ryan Blaney fourth. Eric Almirola in the fifth spot. Ross Chastain ends up holding on to the eighth spot there, right behind Eric Jones and Martin Truex. Christopher Bell and AJ Allmendinger in a car pieced back together comes back from his incredible victory in Portland to take the 10th spot there in a car that was wrecked by Ben Rhodes in practice. A great recovery for him. Austin Cindric had a fine showing for a lot of this, ends up 11th, and Kyle Larson in the 12th spot, and so forth from there. Last place battle was a little bit anticlimactic in this Gateway race. I anticipated coming into this, given what we've seen in the Truck Series races, that maybe we were going to have a series of mechanical issues, certainly brake issues, whether these tight corners or suspension issues. That turned out to not be the case. We had very low attrition in this one. In fact, Corey LaJoie, when he took the last place spot from the other contenders that had problems in the early laps, it wasn't even really given much coverage. I couldn't even figure out exactly what had happened. But of course, NASCAR did relay the message that it was an engine failure on the Spire Motorsports entry. An unfortunate change of events here for Corey, who now ties with BJ McLeod, for the most last place finishes this year with 2 apiece. McLeod probably should still have the bottom 5 tiebreaker there, as he finished in the 30th spot there, next to last car on the lead lap. The ultimate regrouping of the field actually kept 31 cars on the lead lap. Very few people losing laps, or at least not staying a lap down for very long. McLeod was one of the lucky dog recipients. But of course, as mentioned in the chat here too, him being involved in one of the incidents with Chase Elliott. Thought it was very unusual they hooked bumpers at that point. I think it would be very surprising for McLeod to be aggressively getting into anybody else out there. But I think that kind of points to, again, more the accidental nature of the initial Ross Chastain, Denny Hamlin incident. Could just be that, again, we have to remember, this is a new track that the Cup Series hasn't raced on before, new cars that everybody's getting used to, maybe closing rates, adjustments, or what the groove is something that drivers can adjust to. Now, of course, Ross Chastain is a past race winner at Gateway, famously winning for Nice Motorsports when his win was taken away from him at Iowa, and he had to win again at Gateway. And one of the most infamous calls that Vince Welch ever gave to a Truck Series finish, that was the one that Chastain won there. But I do think that the unpredictability of this race thankfully didn't rain on top of everything else. Although, of course, they wouldn't have had rain tires ready for this event here. But just about everything else was kind of up in the air. And I sensed also that it was probably a pretty prestigious race for a lot of competitors. Kurt Busch mentioning running here way back like 20 years ago in the Truck Series, or other people that were successful here in the Xfinity Series. I think those were other things to look at too. But again, at the back of the field there, very unusual situation there. BJ McLeod was at the back of the field, dropped to the rear behind the penalized cars, was losing touch with the field, lost a lap about 24 laps in, which is a bit later in a race than we usually see drivers lose a lap. It seemed like the field, even though it was just the 36 chartered entries, was able to stay bunched close enough together that it was hard enough for people to actually lose a lap very quickly in this one. Chase Briscoe, your pole sitter, led the first 27, 28 laps, had a flat left rear tire. Left rear tire is rearing their ugly head once again. Same issue we had with Ryan Blaney. Kenny Wallace very wisely asked the question, is this going to be an issue for the rest of the year? And I'm willing to believe that it kind of might be. I don't think it's going to be as much of at Sears Point. I think Sears Point next week we're going to see tire failures across the board because of the close competition, the gravel getting kicked onto the track, drivers just running off course. I think it's going to be a very physical race in that sense. I don't think you don't have an issue like on an oval where it's a consistent load bearing on the left rear wheel. But I do think we are going to have a lot of flat tires. I think we're going to see something closer to the 1990 race when they used to have the bias ply tires, and a lot of the front runners had flat tires in the very beginning of the race. I think we're going to see something probably closer to that in a pretty physical race there. Been wrong before. No two Sears Point races play out the same, but we'll certainly talk more about that. But again, the engine failure for Corey LaJoie ultimately took over the last spot there from Briscoe and other competitors that had problems early, including Denny Hamlin for the laps that he lost. But dropping out there, Cody Ware with mechanical issues of his own. But Denny Hamlin, 11 laps down in the 34th spot, and everybody else up there. Well, not Harvick, of course, after his wreck in the 33rd spot. Harvick ended up actually one spot ahead of Hamlin in the results there because of, again, the low attrition and drivers not losing multiple laps. The only other driver losing multiple laps being Ricky Stenhouse in the 32nd spot, 4 laps down. Unfortunately, I know Michael Harvey, one of our regular viewers here, a big Stenhouse fan, unfortunately having a bit of struggles there in the late stages, dropping out of contention there. But another driver got to give a call to, Michael McDowell. Very impressed with him leading those laps. Almost had a stage victory. That would have been excellent for him. Still finishes the 18th spot, 1 spot behind Zane Smith, who found himself in an unpredictable situation after the test result there for Chris Buescher. Zane comes on board there, finishes in the 17th spot in his Cup Series debut. I think, given the fact that there's so many clear differences between the next-gen Cup car and what he's used to in the Truck Series, I think that was a tremendous effort out of him, and certainly good to see there as well. Yeah, a lot of crazy things to certainly look at from that Cup race there as well. Joe Tremonte, thank you again for the super chat there. Not a single Hendrick driver in the top 10. I'm sure Rick Hendrick will be on the phone with NASCAR tomorrow. No doubt, absolutely. Although, again, I think the Sears Point track next week will probably be a good time for them to kind of get their feet back under them. That'll be another thing for them to kind of look at there, too. So that'll be kind of interesting. Hendrick always has great equipment at the road courses. Chase Elliott, of course, his reputation precedes him. And Kyle Larson being the defending winner of it, it's going to be certainly very interesting to see how that all plays out. William Byron even is a pole sitter not too long ago there. I think it's Alex Bowman you got to really think about being a contender in one respect or another, but he's, of course, been turning laps there these last couple of years as well. But yeah, I got to say, yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the Gateway track. I expected something closer to maybe like a flat Darlington in one way or another. I think that they pretty much put on a good show across the board. I think that there's really good opportunities for aggressive moves. That's where, again, I think I'd caution being a little less, punishing of Ross Chastain, because I think there was a lot more of that happening that we just weren't seeing at the same time. I think there were a lot of situations. And that brings us to, again, one of our now weekly features, it seems to be on these shows, complaining about all the issues of the broadcast. I think this weekend, between both the Portland and the race at Gateway, was a clear turning point where we're seeing the production issues really become even more of an issue than even the talent issues in the booth. Clint Boyer was probably the worst part of the talent issues this weekend. The fact that it used to be you'd have like Larry McReynolds repeat what Darrell Waltrip would say, but now Clint Boyer is repeating what other drivers are saying, and he's shouting it into the microphone. That was just getting downright obnoxious. I already knew it was going to be a problem coming into this by having Michael Waltrip, Kenny Wallace, and Clint Boyer in the booth at the same time. But I thought Kenny and Michael were actually pretty good, I think, in this. Clint was just kind of, shoehorning his way in there, and that was just kind of getting frustrating. But the director's side of it, I think the tyranny of the full screen replay is a big thing to talk about. I think there were a lot of moments especially in Saturday's race, in the Portland race, where you had so many things happening that they really should have made use of showing as many multiple shots as possible. And I don't know if it's just the limitations of it being a standalone race, and maybe they didn't have the resources to do that, but by doing these full screen replays and then just completely missing other stuff that happened. And there was a time, there were a couple incidents. I mean, we talked about the Kevin Harvick situation at Charlotte, where he was noticing issues with the broadcast and saying, like, well, wait a minute, why aren't you showing Allgaier and Josh Berry going for position? We had a situation where Adam Alexander, as critical as I've been of him, was noticing the same issue, where Ty Gibbs and I think it was Sheldon Creed at the time had run wide off the track, and you could see Creed come off the track, but then he's like starting to react to it and then do a full screen replay, and unfortunately he kind of drops the issue. But you could tell even at that point, even his laid back attribute, which I still think is kind of a problem with his approach, he was still noticing, like, whoa, wait a minute, what's happening out here? And we don't even know for a while later. It's like, wait, where's Ty Gibbs? Ty Gibbs is up front. What the heck happened to him? And then we find out well after the fact, we finally get a replay that I'm sure was covering up something else that was happening, that he ran off course there. And that was unfortunate, because I think there never seems to be an adjustment with these broadcasts, that when you have a race that has a particularly high amount of stuff happening, especially at a road course where it is very common that you could be on complete opposite ends of the track at a completely other, different feature of the track and have something wild happening. You should anticipate that you're going to need multiple shots happening at the same time. And they were starting to kind of slowly phase that in. But by then, the race was pretty much wrapped up. I think there was so much more that we missed in that. And then, of course, you have a rain-soaked race. You got people sliding off the track everywhere. You're not going to get everything. But I felt like we got a very small fraction of what was happening in that race. And luckily, the fraction that we did see was still entertaining enough. I think we still had some excellent storylines in that one. And also some frustrations and some controversy there at the same time. But I think that was another problem there to talk about too. So let's get into, we'll go ahead and transition into that there at the same time to talk about the Xfinity race. Got to keep getting dehydrated here from all the plenty of stuff to talk about here. So again, on the Xfinity Series side, as with Portland, I think first impressions of the track. I'm thinking back to when it ran in the Truck Series, and I remember it was described back then as almost like a go-kart track with very little elevation changes. Obviously, a much larger track than that, and it's hosted all kinds of different venues and everything. I think Wookie did a great job, Sebastian LaForge, talking about the fact that they really need to kind of improve their fan amenities of the track. But I think the fans themselves that were at the Speedway, one of them being our own Ben Schneider, that's the guest contributor for the Last Car site, had a tremendous time out there in spite of the weather. I think they put on a great show out there. AJ Allmendinger with the win. I thought one thing I think the broadcast did a great job of covering was just how many problems he was having. And it's like, wait a minute, this is AJ Allmendinger. This is like one of the best road course drivers that's out there. Wouldn't surprise me if him, being a big factor at Sears Point next week. But AJ, the fact that he's like sliding off the course during the pace laps, that he then slides off the course again on the first lap of the race, and he's just hopelessly behind. He's in contention for last place at the beginning. You got other people that are missing the chicane. That first chicane at Portland is just such a nightmare. It's so impossibly tight. Very reminiscent of what you had in Montreal, or I believe even Mexico City had a chicane like that too, way back in the Busch Series. But it was riveting to see him kind of climb back into contention, and there was just so much going on with all these other drivers sliding off the track and having issues that I think that the broadcast did a decent enough job of tracking his story and showing it for as meaningful as it was. It was cool that his father got out there to celebrate with him. Tremendous effort there by AJ to pull off that win, and he was just utterly exhausted. And and then drivers further back in the field, you had drivers that just wanted to get the heck out of there, and that was certainly the case for our last place finisher, Sam Mayer, the first of his Xfinity Series career. Mayer very nearly got his first last place run last year at Road America. Had a wreck at one part of the track there, but got beat by Spencer Pompelli. Pompelli was in this race here and actually was able to climb his way to 29th before an accident. But unlike the Gateway Cup race today, very high attrition on both ends. And of course, one of the incidents that came up, of course, was that of Jesse Iwuji, who in the finish of this race finished 71 laps, finished 4 laps down, finished the race under power, but not without some controversy. The opening stages of this race, of course, showed Ty Gibbs picking up where he left off at the Daytona Road Course, where he scored his first win, also under very damp conditions. He was just absolutely on cruise control. Seemed like nobody was going to have anything for him. Certainly not AJ Allmendinger after all the problems he had at the beginning stages of it, and him running at the back of the pack. But you have a caution come out, and apparently, according to one replay, it just looks like the 34 just doesn't see what's happening and just comes in there and just bowls him out of the way in the chicane and sends him into a spin. Then Ty Gibbs spins out. And although Gibbs still had the lead around that time, although there's some controversy with that, I think, the Marcus Ambrose rule probably should have been kicked into play there at that point. Although maybe, I guess the reason they didn't is because it was this incident. They were going to penalize the 34. They didn't want to penalize the 54 at the same time. You probably had some offsetting penalty issue with that. But regardless, even after that point, Gibson, he ran off course with Sheldon Creed, and then he wasn't really a factor for the rest of the day. I wonder if there was some kind of mechanical issue because we saw so much of this in recent weeks where a driver spins out. Kyle Larson in the Cup Series at Darlington, for example, spin the engine backwards, and okay, the car seems like it's fine, but then the engine is toast, and you're just completely out of it. I think we had kind of the beginnings of that, if not for the running off course situation. But yeah, we've talked a lot about Iwuji on this show. Certainly, it comes up a lot in the last place battles. And I've been very vocal in the last couple weeks there, especially since he's brought Kyle Weatherman on. I fully expected that he would have Weatherman in the car again for this race. I think that he has more than proven himself capable of improving that equipment with that 12th place run at Darlington. Weatherman's maybe not the best road course driver out there, and I think Iwuji prefers running the road courses because one of his first truck races for the Realm team, I believe, was at Mosport. But yeah, I think really the time has come to kind of really look at his role with that team, and it's an unfortunate situation because there's a lot of forces at play. I think that NASCAR would be very happy to have him be more competitive and feature, having diverse ownership in the sport, having Emmett Smith involved with the team, having his military service. He kind of checks a lot of boxes. I think that NASCAR would be very happy to be talking about more. But I think, and I hope that this is the case, that the fact that he's been able to assemble all this together and start this new program and have Emmett Smith on board and bring these new investors on there, that, again, that he's an excellent team owner, that if he just gets out of the driver's seat and just focuses on that, and it's a hard decision to make. It's a hard decision, to kind of have any driver face, especially somebody that's, relatively new in their career. But I think the time has come to kind of really kind of address that. I think Iwuji, much like Ross Chastain during the race today, was very good in pointing out that, he anticipated that, he's going to make, that Ty Gibbs was going to let him get around him, that apparently it was some kind of thing that NASCAR was telling him to pass him. Didn't anticipate that Gibbs was taking a wide entry to the corner. It closed up and you had this incident. I thought he was very open about that. But again, just like with the Chastain one, unfortunately the result was the same, and Gibbs wasn't a factor in that race, and I'm sure Gibbs isn't too happy about how all that played out. But I think it's still, I hope that there's somebody in Jesse Iwuji's ear that's saying, look, you could do a lot, great for the sport as a team owner, in keeping this team going, put Weatherman in the car, or get some other development drivers you can bring in there if you want to kind of keep that presence going. But I think for Iwuji, I don't know, hopefully he can get some other experience in other lower series. If he needs to do what Mike Seneca is doing, for example. I think he's in like the Super Cup Stock Car Series or some series like that. Seneca had a lot of similar problems there. I mean, in that, he was running very slow and NASCAR was very frustrated with him. Guys that can bring in sponsors or even, get rides with underfunded teams, or in the case of Iwuji, start a team of his own. The time has come, I think, to really kind of examine that, because I would hate for Iwuji to get in a situation where it's just like, oh no, he's just a wrecking ball. Like, he's just out there and, everybody knows that you got to be careful racing this guy because he's going to, cause wrecks and all that. I think that'd be unfortunate for him. And hopefully, I'm sure he's thinking about it. I'm sure that it's been some kind of a factor, because I know he can't be happy being the center of so many incidents. And especially if you're starting to get in situations, I'm not a person that, is going to say that, the race leader should have like special privileges that, like, oh, this guy was going to win the race, and, this, if not for this happening, and he should have been entitled to win it. I don't think that was the case with Ty Gibbs. But I think that there's been enough evidence from, the slow run at Kansas where he was flagged off the track, for being in other incidents where, the Charlotte incident a couple years ago in the Truck Series where he had a big wreck with other drivers. I think there does have to be some kind of thing. And maybe NASCAR needs to re-examine their licensing policy to kind of look into this too. Because, yeah, I mean, they've created a situation where you have drivers that come in there to be paid drivers or people that, that's just not their strength. But hopefully something works out there, because I think Iwuji's interest in NASCAR is genuine. I think his passion for it is genuine. And I think he has a very interesting story that he can contribute there. And I'm sure, and I know it's been raised a lot, and I know, maybe, there's a lot at play there. I'm sure that NASCAR would like him to be more successful than he is. I think it's almost like Danica Patrick. It kind of reminds me of that in that same sense. That NASCAR really wanted to have a popular female driver that was really successful there, and it just didn't work out. And sometimes it just doesn't. And maybe you find another place that works out better for you. I know that and this isn't a thing about any other identifiers. I don't think this is a race issue or anything like that. I don't want to make it sound like that. I think that because again, I think that Danica had very much the same situations in her career. I think that JD McDuffie had the very same thing in his career. There were plenty of people saying, look, why don't you get out of the driver's seat and be a mechanic? And maybe if he had done that, he probably would have had a better, maybe more stable lifestyle, and certainly wouldn't have been in that accident in Watkins Glen. But again, I mean, he was happy doing it and just kind of kept staying out there. And unfortunately, in the end of his career, he had some accidents that, probably other drivers weren't happy about. Kenny Wallace, you saw in the booth today, actually had an incident with him at Dover back in 1991. It's just an unfortunate situation, but I do think that there probably should be something done. I think if it's getting to the situation where it's interfering with what's happening at the front of the field, I mean, that's at least time to look at it. But I don't know. I mean, it's a tricky part with this because all these teams are businesses in their own right. They can operate these teams however they see fit. There's certain standards, competition standards they have to follow from NASCAR to actually be able to compete. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the thing is. I kind of feel the same way that I do about the situation with Cup guys and lower series, that maybe there would just be a moment of clarity where you just kind of take a step back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. Like maybe we should do something different. But maybe at that point you do kind of have to have somebody step in, and say something about it. So I don't know. I don't know who that would be. I don't know how that would work, but I just hate it for him because it's unfortunate. But I do think it's reached a point where something kind of needs to be done at that point there. So hopefully something works out there. And again, I don't want this to be construed as like saying that he shouldn't be in the sport, because look, he started a team. I'm very big on like anybody if you start a team in NASCAR, those are in such short supply now. Because so often we only have a new team pop up if like another team closes, or sometimes multiple teams. If you're starting a team out of whole cloth, I think that's great. So I think if he just operated that team, put Weatherman or somebody else in that car, and then spent another time, in his same shop, develop a Super Cup car or something like that, and get some more laps under his belt, I think that'd be great. I think I think the other reason that, and again, there's some intersectionality with this, that, the other reason I don't like having Cup guys in lower series is that you have drivers that are going to be like, guys like AJ Allmendinger, where maybe they're not in the best situation in their career in the Cup Series, or they're just kind of going from one week to the next and they're not very competitive. Take a step down there and see what you can do, and you're presenting Cup talent down there, and then you find a better situation to bring yourself back up. I mean, AJ Allmendinger is in the best position he's ever been in. I anticipate Justin Allgaier could probably find a way to be in there too. But that would be another one to kind of look at the same time. So I don't want to lean into that too much more, but I mean, again, I think that's a situation. But yeah, Rick S., you're putting it perfectly. Yeah, more laps. Just needs way more laps. I'm sure if he tried to get a Cup Series right, he probably had the same thing happen that NASCAR had to do with Jennifer Jo Cobb last year. And it was unfortunate, and I wasn't a fan of it either. But, again, I think if there is an approval process and you want to make sure that the driver's ready to tackle Cup driving, much less Cup Super Speedway driving, maybe there should be a higher standard in place. But I don't know what that is. But that was an unfortunate situation. But I will, again, I also want to make sure to give credit, as with Ross Chastain, that Iwuji came out and said, look, this is what happened. I thought this is what was going on. Clearly I was in the wrong, and hopefully he's talking more with Gibbs on it. It'd be interesting to find out, but I'm not sure. And of course the Xfinity series is now going to be off for a couple weeks before they go to Nashville, so I don't know if we're going to see much more on that coming up. Other interesting stories in the Xfinity Series field. Daryl Dilley, I really liked that the broadcast took a moment to feature the PE teacher turned 55-year-old SCCA driver that was out there competing, that he got this ride with RSS Racing just because he had more laps around the track. Now, again, just like Jesse Iwuji, a driver with very limited experience, but again, pretty long experience on the track itself. I think that was able to be the different situation. Unfortunately, he ended up involved in one of those accidents, the Greg Alding accident with Riley Herbst, and dropped him out in the early laps there. But I thought it was nice that they at least mentioned him in the broadcast because it was an interesting story. That's what you always find at these road courses. It seems like you'll get these gentleman drivers out there that are able to just stay out there forever. And that's kind of the fun part. I think of Tommy Dreese and some of these other guys like that. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what the entry list looks like this week for Trucks and Cup. But I anticipate we probably have a couple guys just like that. But I don't remember if I mentioned this. I think I probably blitzed right by it here. But Sam Mayer, yeah, again, the first last place finish of his Cup his Xfinity career. One thing I was really interested in writing about it. It's amazing how quickly he's risen through the ranks. I kind of had a different thought of his career to this point. But of course, Truck Series win at Bristol and kind of getting up there, and his success in ARCA, it's just been impressive. And, it's unfortunate he had this last place run, but I think, again, sometimes that's where the last place deal kind of highlights, the success of a top driver. If top driver just every once in a while has a bad run, and he just looked like, he exactly said he just wanted to go home after that wreck there, and you can hardly blame him. But just caught up in some mess there during the wet part of the race. But that was something to see at the same point there. But a wild one. I know there was a poll online that was asking about, what should be done with the Portland track. Should it be back on the Xfinity schedule? And I'm kind of in the camp of I'd like to see a dry race there for sure. I have kind of a passing memory of the old Truck Series races there, and I seem to enjoy them. I thought it was kind of an interesting track. And I think the Xfinity Series, especially on the road courses, always puts on just a tremendous show. I think that this one was another good example of it. There were so many comers and goers in this one with the changing track conditions and so forth. Reminded me very much of that Road America race where Brendan Gaughan won, and I believe it was Kevin O'Connell almost won the race for Rick Ware's team. Just tremendous kind of race there. I'd like to see a race in the dry. I think you would see something very much like Coda, where I thought Coda's race this year was great. I thought they did. It's maybe not my favorite road course out there, but I think that it more than showed why it needs to be on the Cup schedule. Not just the fact that it had a first-time winner in Ross Chastain, but I think it just put on a good show. I think the only problem with Coda is, of course, since it's so much of it is just pavement from being a Formula One track, you have that whole track limits issue, and that just becomes kind of an ooh rule again. I always talk about how much I don't like ooh rules where, NASCAR would step in and say, ooh, you did this. Like, I'm not a big fan of that. I think tracks with more natural barriers kind of work that out, where, again, Sears Point, Watkins Glen, Road America, any of those, Mid-Ohio, I think those are more, conducive. But I think it put on a good enough show that I was entertained. I think it's a decent track there. I think it'd be a very tricky one to cover in person because the sight lines aren't that good. I'm glad they have that big viewing tower there. But I think beyond that, I think it'd be very hard to kind of actually figure what's happening until they come right by you on the main straightaway there. Even more than Watkins Glen. I think Watkins Glen had some good sight lines from last time we were there. But yeah, I'd like to see a dry race there. I think it would be a good show. I think but I think the pieces are there. It certainly had good races in the Truck Series, the K&N West races. Herschel McGriff had one of his last starts out here. That was tremendous. I remember that coming up in a class once. That they were asking me about, like, hey, what's this about some guy in his 80s driving a NASCAR? And it's like, oh yeah, Herschel McGriff. So that was kind of neat. But talking about the race itself here, a lot of drivers that were very impressive in this one here. First and foremost, have to talk about J.J. Yaley. Had the right strategy with the dry tires towards the end of the event. Was able to get an 8th place finish. Very nearly got a 6th place finish at the end there, but couldn't quite hold off Hemrick and Gibbs in the final run, but did hold off Noah Gragson, and apparently injured his thumb towards the end of the race there too. Luis Torres, who always does great work there at the track, had some video with him there. But a great run for Yaley. I'm very happy for him. It's a guy I always seem to run into at the track. I don't know if he's going to run Sears Point or not. Sometimes he did with Jonathan Cohen's team. I think that's great for him. I mean, he hadn't had a top 10 in the Xfinity Series since 2017 at Iowa. And that was a race that, much like this one, didn't have any, Cup Series regulars in it, and put on a good show in that one. So tremendous effort for him. I know that's got to be great for Carl Long and their program going forward. Even Matt Jaskol got an 18th place run. He came back from a penalty there to kind of work his way in there. Andy Lally, I think, was very impressive. I was really hoping that maybe we'd have a first win for Alpha Prime Racing. I believe he was the one that inherited the lead when Ty Gibbs slid off the track there. I thought that was tremendous. He led the race for just 3 laps, but it seemed much longer than that. But it's a very impressive run for him and the Alpha Prime effort. Unfortunately, his teammate Stephen Parsons seemed to have all sorts of problems, especially after he got rear-ended out there. Speaking of rear-enders, you have to certainly talk about what happened with Myatt Snyder, or not Myatt Snyder. Myatt Snyder, we'll get to him, of course, but with Sheldon Creed and Jay Buford out there. Now, the replays seem to indicate that Creed got most of his damage from running in the back of Alex LeBay, but again, apparently Jay Buford had a role in that too. Good to see Buford back out there battling for a top 10, or perhaps even more, restarting on the front row with Yaley in that final run. But apparently Buford got in the back of Creed. Creed ends up wrecking his car. And then, of course, the return of the double bird, the old Will Power style on the back straightaway there. Creed none too happy with Buford. But Buford trying to do the very best with what he can. Again, the last report I heard from the Big Machine team was that they were going to continue to have Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick run that car for the rest of the regular season when it resumes in Nashville, and that the playoffs was going to be up in the air. From there, they were just going to figure out who was going to be in the car for the final few races towards the championship. This was definitely a big opportunity for Buford, and he was absolutely throwing everything at it to get the best run he could, a top 10, if not a top 5. Car was absolutely beat to heck. Restarted on the front row, wasn't able to stay up there with the tires that he had. Had a fender rub there. I believe Justin Allgaier got into him. And he dropped back to finish in the 14th spot. Luckily got a caution there so he could get the tires fixed. But unfortunately still didn't have a great run out there. But not a terrible run at the same time. Certainly wasn't the driver that was ended up being featured in the last car article. So I think there's some positives to be gleaned from that. Same thing with Landon Castle. He looked like he was going to have a good shot at it. Ended up getting a fender peeled back there, finished in the 15th spot. Scott Heckert for BJ McLeod's team in 13th. Great run for him. They actually had to tape up a number on the nose of the car there. Looked like kind of a last-minute patch job there, so that was kind of interesting. But a good run for him. But Myatt Snyder, so impressive there for the Jordan Anderson team. I know Jordan, well, I know specifically because he responded on Twitter pretty quickly. Absolutely jumping up and down there to see the 31 car do as well as it did, which was no small challenge for that team since they had their truck program over in Gateway for the race on Saturday earlier the same day, and so they got they have their vehicles in 2 different venues, and Anderson had actually a pretty solid run in the Gateway truck race too, so that was certainly good to see. So kudos to Snyder. Looked like he was going to pull it off. Led 19 laps there, but Allmendinger was just way too much for him there in the final laps, and would not be denied. But a great run there again for Snyder in the 2nd spot. Austin Hill, Josh Berry, and Justin Allgaier, your top 5 there. But lots of interesting runs. Ryan Vargas, 23rd place there, driving for Mike Harmon. His first start in a team that was not JD Motorsports. Kudos to the 47 team. It's good to talk about Harmon's program whenever you can. Usually you see them. I remember, I think it was like in 2017, Harmon's team kind of seemed to hire more of these road course experts. But unfortunately, they usually seem to have mechanical issues. That wasn't the case this time around with Vargas behind the wheel, finishing 2 laps down in the 23rd spot there, with the car pretty much intact, which a lot of drivers, given the weather conditions, couldn't say. But kudos to the Rhino gang on that one. I think that was outstanding. Patrick Emmerling snuck through in an unsponsored number 35 there, finishing the 19th spot. On the lead lap, no less, too. Again, another driver that we don't see too much of, but got to be immortalized with everyone else on the starting line as starting the first Xfinity race there at Portland, finishing in the 19th spot there, right behind Jaskol and Lally. Seemed like Ryan Sieg was going to maybe sneak something through there in that Xfinity race. Unfortunately, ends up 16th in the final running order. Again, the late run is always a challenge there for that 39 team. They just haven't been able to figure it out. But they got a couple weeks to kind of regroup and figure things out for Nashville and everything going forward. Greg Galding's hit with Herbst was pretty frightening. I think Galding had a huge hit to the 98. Glad that both of them are okay, at least from the last reports I'm hearing on that. But that was definitely the story on that. But yeah, I thought it was a good race. I thought that it was a pretty crazy one. I mean, obviously with the rain, you're going to have that. These drivers aren't necessarily experts when it comes to dealing with weather, especially when you had this particular set of circumstances where it was really on again, off again at enough of a rate that you had dry spots on the track. Made it really interesting. I'm glad to see a lot of tire strategy there. But I wouldn't, and again, it's the Northwest, so you're going to get a lot of rain. Even if you ran this thing on the 4th of July, you'd probably have the same problem. Again, I think it'll have an interesting spot on the calendar. But I hope we see a race without the rain in the near future, because I think we'd have a better judge of how competitive that track could actually be coming up there as well. Oh, Beast of Metal, I missed your super chat from earlier there. Also, though, since there was a bit of a Kaufman clock damaged vehicle policy drama, here's an obligatory screw the clock and screw its namesake super chat. Thank you for that as well there, Beast of Metal. Yeah, I know they were mentioning, talking more about the Bubba Wallace one. I guess we didn't talk about that in the show last week. But that was an unfortunate deal. Apparently, it had something to do, if I remember the story correctly, it had something to do with the halfway break where they did the moment of remembrance, which is nice and everything. I think that, I think the opening ceremony is a more appropriate time to do all that. I can't imagine them doing that halfway through the Indy 500, for example. I think once the race starts, it should just be the focus on the competition itself. Apparently, Bubba Wallace got spun, was just running slower there before that, and then came down pit road for that, and then they told him to park, and then he was just out of the race. So I'm still not a big fan of it. Again, I think it falls under the ooh rule category of just kind of a gotcha thing, but that's a whole different deal there. And thank you also, Alex Viveros, for your super chat as well. If Zane Smith keeps running this well, don't be shocked if he goes to Penske next year in Xfinity, then in Cup by 25. Top 20 in your first start, not bad. Absolutely. Zane Smith, it may have been crushing to lose that championship last year and be continually a factor in these each season, but he's getting there. I think that that 17th place run, especially in a Cup race that had such low attrition, it wasn't like he had to out-survive a whole lot of people that were laps down. In fact, you had 31 drivers on the lead lap. If he spun out or if he just had a miserable afternoon, he would have been 30th, 31st place, and maybe we wouldn't be talking about him. But right in the mix of it, green, white checker or none, 17th place, I mean, that is outstanding. And he's not the only big name that had a great run this weekend, too. We talked about the ones from Portland, and we got a couple more to talk about the Truck Series race here as well. I think there's a lot of talent coming into the sport that we should be very excited about, and we're seeing plenty more of it coming up here as well. But yes, thank you very much for the super chat there as well. I definitely agree with that at the same time. We talked about Yaley. Alex Lebay, mentioned him getting in the incident there with Creed, recovering to finish in the 10th spot. He even slid off the course at one point, Lebay did. Great run out of him. I mean, it seems like the hardest conditions you can get is when he's going to do the best. Remember that monsoon we had at the Charlotte Roval not too long ago? Lebay was right up there too. So was Josh Williams. But unfortunately, Williams in this one, I think, was further back in the 22nd spot. The BJ McLeod effort just not quite up to the same level as Mario Gosselin's team, the DGM effort there. But hopefully that gap will kind of close up a little bit more at the same time too. We'll go into the Truck Series race here too. The last place battle, again, settled relatively early on, although I think it was the third most laps that a Truck Series last place finisher has ever completed before Taylor Gray went into the outside wall. And actually, this kind of goes Beast of Metal. I think that this may be your Kaufman clock situation to kind of bring up here, because that was, more or less the situation here. The fact that Gray had very minor damage on the number 17 when he got spun into the outside wall by Ty Majeski. couldn't get the truck refired, and by getting towed to the garage area, that ended his race. He didn't actually have a chance to get back out there. So he had very minor damage to that number 17. I think if it just started back up, he probably could have salvaged at least maybe a top 20 out of it. It seemed like he had a fast enough piece. I think he was in the top 10 when he got spun. But unfortunately, that wasn't the situation. And Taylor Gray had his first last place finish in his Truck Series career. John Hunter Nemechek, Brennan Poole, Chris Wright, and Ty Majeski himself rounding out the bottom five. Big thanks to a lot of the contributors that we had on pictures this week. Budget Racing 51 on Twitter. Big thanks to him for contributing several pictures from the Truck Series race. I talked about Luis Torres earlier. Sent some pictures there from the Xfinity race, as well as our own Ben Schneider that was covering the action there as well. So it's been pretty busy. We had our William Saki at the Indy 500 last week. You see his feature on Renus VK that was posted on the website this past week. We had Ben Schneider at Portland last week, and now I'm going to meet up with Ben at the Sears Point track this weekend. So a lot of last car coverage out there between the three of us here, and I think that's going to be something pretty exciting there to look forward to at the same time. But at the Truck Series side, one other thing to definitely talk about, a great job by Raja Caruth once again. His Truck Series debut had to come from the back of the pack at least twice, if not three times. You realize that he had started in the 19th spot. He had a pit road penalty. He had an unscheduled stop where he had to change tires. Almost had a top 10. The unofficial results showed him in 10th. Chase Purdy was just ahead of him there. But an 11th place run in his first ever truck start. Yes, it is a Spire Motorsports injury. That basically has been the Hendrick injury that we've seen guys like Alex Bowman and William Byron and stuff do. And of course, now that's taken on a whole other life of its own in the Xfinity series in some races coming up here. But you still got to drive the thing, man. And there's been a lot of drivers that have struggled with that same team too. Raja not being one of them. So I think that was one of the most exciting aspects of that one. And kudos to the broadcast for mentioning it, in spite of Vince Welch being just utterly uninterested in what most of the race was happening there. It seemed like when you had the Grant Enfinger incident with, I believe it was Chandler Smith, and they were spinning out in turns 1 and 2, and they just sound casually disappointed, as if it was just like, oh, that's too bad, they ran out of my favorite soup. Like, it's just like, well, hang on, like, I'm not expecting you to like leap out of your chair and like, start screaming at me either, but like when their leaders wreck each other, like that should be a big moment. That should, at any point, especially if it's like halfway through the race like this one was. That was absurd. And there was so much other stuff we were missing in that race too. It just sends the wrong message. It makes it seem like, as I said in the video, I know there are people suggesting I do another video on the broadcast problems thing. I don't think I need to. Like I said last week, I think everybody's seeing the trends. I pointed out the trends in the video, and now everybody's seeing them. And it's like, okay, well, look, I can do a video just showing more evidence of it, but do we really need more of it? I mean, it needs to change. It's got to change. And this was another example of it. Again, the missed Ty Gibbs incident in the Xfinity race, and then, yeah, the dispassionate call of the Truck Series race, when anything was happening up front. Certainly a factor there at the same time. But again, at the same time, a lot of positives to glean from it. Specifically, again, the great run from Raja Caruth, Johnny Sauter continuing to maintain an almost perfect record at Gateway. The, of course, significant exception being a last place run in 2020. But we cannot mention this truck race without giving a special shout out to Carson Hocevar. The video that was posted, I believe, on NASCAR Given 8's channel on YouTube is quite harrowing. If you have not seen it yet, I just advise you that it's a little. I mean, you don't see anything that's in any way appalling, but the voice of Carson Hocevar after the impact that Tyler Hill had with him on the last lap, just an unfortunate situation, just a clear broadside there during a stacked up green-white checker run is quite harrowing. So if you haven't seen it yet, I caution you on that if that's something that bothers you. Last I haven't heard any other updates that anybody else has, that he was hospitalized with apparently an injury to his lower extremity. The video seemed to indicate it was a problem with his foot. The details are very sketchy, so I don't want to speculate on that. Obviously, certainly hoping for the best on him on that. He was conscious, which is the important thing. But beyond that, one of the storylines of this season, and even of the last couple seasons, I guess, really, good kid out there trying to get his first win, protege of Johnny Benson. Unfortunately, things took a bad turn there at the end of the Gateway race, and he had the tangle with Tyler Hill. So hopefully, we'll get some more information as the week continues here, and we'll find out what happened there with driver of the 42. I was certainly hoping on to meet up with him again here at Sears Point this week, but it looks like that may be in jeopardy there based on the results that we have, the information so far, but we don't know anything beyond that at the moment. Another less significant heartbreak, but at the same time, one at the same time was that of Derek Kraus, who started the race in last place. He actually crossed the line in 31st. He had all the penalized drivers drop behind him and almost had the win. Very close to pulling it off after getting his last place run, I believe it was at Texas a couple weeks ago. Didn't quite shake out for him, finishing in the 7th spot there still for him. A great run. But I know he was looking for a bit more. But that's just kind of the way that race shook out there. So kind of middle of the road in terms of attrition there between the Cup Series race and the Xfinity Series race, but a different outcome nevertheless. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, RD Fox 76, for the information. Yeah. So hopefully we get some more information on that. But yeah, I can certainly understand if they did further examinations. They're trying to get some more information on that. Oh yes, Beast Metal mentioning Ross Chastain being on the clock while Hamlin was stalling him. Yeah, that was interesting. It seemed like that was going. It would have been, yeah, it would have been terrible if that was the reason that would have taken him out of the race. I think that would have been just absurd. But clearly, Denny was looking for any. You talk about somebody who probably knows the rules backwards and forwards would be Denny Hamlin there, understanding that the one was still on the crash clock and trying to hold him up. But yeah, again, that's the problem with these rules. You can put somebody in a situation where it seems like they deliberately break them, and then NASCAR's just gonna be like, "Ooh, you did that," and then that's another reason I'm not crazy about those. I think there's probably a good portion of the rule book you could trim down with just things that are entirely too subjective and not correlating enough with safety concerns there to kind of be an issue. So that'd be another one to kind of look at too. Alrighty. Let me check here as well. We'll do a little bit on our show and tell segment and trivia here. We're going to kind of trim the show up here a little bit because I have another obligation here this evening, but I definitely want to make sure to kind of cover all of the major points from the top 3 series here as well. And as we look forward again to the racing at Sears Point. Many people call it the Sonoma Raceway. I know Jill Gregory still does, and her work at the track there. Big thing I would suggest, yeah, again, if you haven't checked it out, I had an interview a couple weeks ago with Kyle Foster and Jill Gregory over at the track. Jill answered some great questions about her plans to kind of modernize the track, even brought up the issue of bringing back the Sears Point name. She talks about it. I thought she was very candid with us. I thought she gave a very good interview. If you hadn't had a chance to check it out, on this channel here, I have a list of podcast appearances. Look up the latest one on there that is posted on Kyle's channel there, which talks about the track there. So if you're looking for some more bonus content to get you ready for Sears Point this weekend, I definitely recommend checking that one out. Alrighty. And indeed it is. The countdown finally to the Toyota Save Mart 350, which for the first time since 2019 is going to have a full capacity. We're still at the point here where things are kind of loosening up out this direction. But we had limited capacity last year. We covered the race last year when Ricky Stenhouse had a wreck in turn 1, then an engine failure after the team was able to piece the car back together. It's going to be very interesting to see how differently that's going to play out with these cars. I'm also going to be very interested in the way that heat's dispersed through these cars. The last couple of years, we saw Cody Ware's very scary situation where he was fatigued getting out of the car. I believe that was in 2019. things of that nature. Didn't hear as many issues about it during the race today in Gateway. It was a little hard to tell what the weather conditions were because it looked like some clouds were coming in towards the end of it. But Sears Point, I think, is going to be a very good test of this and all that. And also with the return of the chute, return of the traditional, well, not the traditional configuration, but the 1998 era one there. I think that's going to be very exciting to see as well. I know photographers love getting those shots off of turn 4. And of course, there's some grandstands over there too that really didn't get a good view of anything when you had the carousel. So there's been a kind of a trade off there. But I think it's going to be very exciting. I think that this, especially since Coda, I think that I've been very anxious to see how these cars are going to handle a natural road course with actual natural barriers. That I think will be a good indication of what we're going to get, not just here, but again at Road America and Watkins Glen later this season. That'll be something to see for sure. But as I've said, this is the closest race to an off-road rally. You can have a situation where people are just throwing everything at each other. I think you're going to see a lot of aggression. I think we're going to probably see some good mechanical issues too. I think these problems with these dang toe ends, snapping off or bending or whatever, could be critical. And you're going to need a team Denny Hamlin's team can't do it in more than like 5 laps. It's going to be absolutely catastrophic for any of these other teams having that problem. I don't know if anything's going to be fixed between now and then. I don't think if anything can be done, frankly. But we'll find out what's the situation going to be. So that's certainly what we're going to be looking at. But very excited to get back there. We're going to have part of Todd Bodine's March to 800 starts. He's going to be in the Truck Series race on Saturday. We got practice and I believe a qualifying session on Friday afternoon. So I'll be there all 3 days. We're going to get the credentials approved. So big thanks to NASCAR and to Jill Gregory and the staff there at the track there. Very happy to be back there and doing the coverage. I have some stuff planned as well for this weekend because actually this is going to be the 30th anniversary of the first NASCAR race I ever attended at the Sonoma Raceway in 1992. This being 2022. I have some plans on that. Actually, if you check out the lastcar.info website, I have also upgraded the banner to the website as well to a Sears Point theme. So that's going to be kind of something that's part of this weekend as well. So very excited about that. Definitely stay tuned to the Twitter at LastCarOnBrock and everything else from that weekend. Looking to get you guys some more good coverage from behind the scenes there. So stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to get that going there for sure. So yeah, we'll see what happens on that end. I do have something for show and tell here as well. A little something here to talk about. If you guys have any of your questions, something I haven't covered from the racing this weekend, definitely make sure to let me know, and we'll get into that at the same time. I saw the compliments on the tie shirt. Thank you. I'm glad you guys like that. I was disappointed that they didn't make this one in diecast, the Gain car for Bristol, but I'm glad they made it in shirt form there, so I definitely wanted to bring that out. And Ty actually had a good run today. He was actually around the 15th spot for a good portion of it. I think he slipped back in the closing stages and ended up a bit further back. Where was he in that? Showing in the 27th spot. So yeah, not the best run they were hoping for, but still showing some improvement out there from that. So that's another one to kind of talk about. So we'll go ahead and jump into our trivia segment, and we'll dovetail this with our show and tell as well. Let's see here. The categories, again, on the NASCAR Tiger Electronics deal here. Categories, once again, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So go ahead and mention which one you'd like in the chat here, and we'll go ahead and do that. The categories, once again, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild cards. Those are your categories there as well. Another thing I did, I have my eBay store for the LastCar website. I have it linked to the page as well. I have put these hats back up for sale. I was able to, I wanted to pick up, buy some inventory on hand, so I was able to kind of drop the price a bit more on those. I believe it's $34.99 with free shipping on that. So any of you guys that are interested in wearing one of these, I have them in 2 different styles. If you prefer the kind of the webbing on the back of it, like the one I have here, well, heck, I could just take it off this way. I have it both in this style here with, there it is, kind of the mesh on the back, or if you prefer something with just a regular kind of I guess the canvas style there. These are on 3930 brand new era caps here. Same ones that I was wearing at the track there. Very comfortable. Perfect for summer where you get the white there so you don't have too much heat absorbing into your scalp. And that's definitely one thing that I'm working on. Yeah, if you're interested in that, I do have those back for sale online there. There is a little bit of a turnaround time on that. I actually get these embroidered locally on a per order basis. So I have those up for you guys there at the same time. Chips Never 957, I see your comment there. Quick shout out to Will Power Redemption for last year's Heartbreak Stall Out. He's really showing to be a championship contender this year. I didn't watch the IndyCar race there, but I understand. I've seen a couple comments here on Will pulling off the win there, so congratulations to him. Shocked to hear that's like what they're saying. That's the last IndyCar race they're going to do in Detroit. Seems like that's a traditional venue there for so many years. I don't know if it's just a contract issue or whatever is going on over there, but it's a little disappointing to hear about that. Let's see. Do we have race results here? Just kind of pull this up. I guess we don't have that quite yet. Boop. Okay, I don't know why that goes to the racingreference.info privacy policy, but there you go. Alrighty. We got a couple for Pitts. Oh, we got like 4 for Pitts already. It sounds like Pitts is going to be the winner here. And we'll get into that. So we will be, we're going to wrap this up here probably a little bit. It's going to be kind of a little bit of a shorter show here, folks. We're just about done at this part here, but I will do a couple questions here for those of you staying in the show here a bit longer tonight here. But we'll get this all set up. So we will, hang on. We had some Pitts questions. That's correct. Alrighty. Here we go. Alrighty. So I heard something about them leaving Belle Isle. I don't know if that's the case, but that was my understanding. So yeah. Oh, downtown street circuit. Okay. That's probably what it was. Okay. Anyway, here we go. First question. What atmospheric element is used to inflate NASCAR Winston Cup tires? What atmospheric element is used to inflate NASCAR Winston Cup tires? That's our first question. We got a little bit of chemistry here to kind of lead off our segment on here. Oh, I retweeted this earlier too, or I guess I just reposted it. Brad Perez is hoping to make his next Truck Series start at Sears Point this weekend. There's a last-minute push where he is selling T-shirts of the number 43 paint scheme that I guess he has the I Set My Friends on Fire, the band, on the truck there. Thought that was pretty hip. The 43 team has absolutely struggled these last few weeks. They've had a combination of last place runs or DNQs or just mechanical issues. But Perez, who made his debut at COTA earlier this year, is now actually in the process of doing this. And here, I'll just show it on the phone here. It's not the best shot of it there, but indeed running the number 43 on there again. We'll see if things come together on that end. I haven't heard anything new about what the sponsorship is, if this is something official or not. But of course, certainly looking to kind of get as much funding as possible to hopefully get that going there too, because that would be great. I'd be perfectly happy interviewing him as a driver here. I've certainly seen him as a crew member, and it'd be great to see him get a good run out there at Sears Point. I think given that what he was able to do driving for the Ream team back at COTA, hopefully something works out on that end there too. So definitely check out Brad Perez's page if you haven't already to see what's happening on that end. The question again, what atmospheric element is used to inflate NASCAR Winston Cup tires? Alrighty, and the answer is nitrogen. Nitrogen is the correct answer, at least in the late 90s here. Nitrogen. Oh, a lot of you got that one. RD Fox 76, you were the first one on that. Nitrogen, not sulfur hexafluoride. And there you go. Not quite oxygen, but no, there you go. Yeah, it is. It is too bad there's not a cars category. I guess teams or maybe pits kind of. There's probably some overlap. The NASCAR one probably just has the general car information here. Alrighty. Next question. What term refers to the difference in circumference of left and right side tires? What term refers to the difference in circumference of left and right side tires? That is our next question here. Did I talk about McDowell leading those laps there during the race? That was fantastic. Great job by McDowell and a bit of strategy in the 34 team, working some tire strategy to get up front and keeping the lead up. I thought that was impressive. Still dropped back a bit. I think in the finish, where was he in the results? He was still top 10, wasn't he? Or he was just outside? No, he was 18th at the finish. But again, much like we talked about Cole Custer at Charlotte last week, it just sometimes it's just not a good indication of how well he did. And Custer himself seemed like he was going to have a top 5 run going, and then unfortunately got in that incident towards the end. Looks like a lot of you guys got the answer to this one already. The term that refers to the difference in circumference of the left and right side tires, the answer is indeed stagger. Stagger is the correct answer. Got the moves like stagger. There you go, exactly. Fox's last race next week. Fox has already now done their last Xfinity race, so we'll see how things play out from there. Adam Pope, looks like you were the first one on the stagger response here. We're going to wrap this one up a little early here, folks. But we're going to have plenty more content for you guys here this week as we lead into the Sears Point weekend. And definitely more this weekend itself. It's going to be very exciting. So we'll wrap this up here with one more question for tonight. The last question. What metal strips are used to measure body curvature on NASCAR Winston Cup cars? Last question is, what metal strips are used to measure body curvature on NASCAR Winston Cup cars? Alrighty. What metal strips are used to measure body curvature on NASCAR Winston Cup cars? That's our last question for this evening. Alright, we got the claw. Ooh, we're talking about different eras. That's the fun part. Axles, rulers, templates. They still get trucks. Yeah, we have trucks and cup for Fox, but they've done their last Xfinity race, so we're not out of the woods yet into the NBC forest at this point, but we're getting very close to that. What metal strips are used to measure body curvature on NASCAR Winston Cup cars? Yeah, it's interesting phrasing there. I think I know what it's asking for, but it's asking for it in a very bizarre way, which is definitely one aspect of this thing. Alrighty, here we go. Last question for the evening, folks. Here we go. What metal strips are used to measure body curvature on NASCAR Winston Cup cars? The answer is templates. Templates is the correct answer, and a lot of you got that one, of course. Templates. Tank Slapper, I think you were the first one ahead of Charles Peterson Jr., and several others of you got that one as well. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Congratulations again to Joey Logano, pending the results of post-race inspection. I will make one more quick check of Pockrass's page to see if we have any official word yet. I think we're still... No, we are not early. We are right on it. 6 minutes ago, tech is complete. No issues. Logano is the winner, says Bob Pockras. So congratulations to Joey Logano, your first race winner at Gateway. And it is going to be a last place article for Corey LaJoy tonight. That'll be posted later this evening. The Xfinity and Truck articles are already up. And that will about do it for this week's show. So in the meantime, our next show is going to be after the race weekend at the Sonoma Raceway. We will actually still be at the track at our usual time next Sunday. So I anticipate next Monday afternoon, probably about 6 o'clock Pacific time. I'll have more information on that. We'll do a review of the entire weekend with the Truck Series and the Cup Series, as well as the stuff behind the scenes. In the meantime, stay very close to at LastCarOnBrock for more information this week. Patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock if you're interested in some bonus content. I have the magnet printed out already for the door if you want to join that. You can join any level of the Patreon, as little as $1, and get your name on there and be entered in a drawing to win said magnet. after the conclusion of the race weekend. We got a nice Ricky Stenhouse theme to mark the last place finisher of the 2021 race there. And yeah, we're gonna just do it to it here. So be great to go back to the old home track there, and I hope to have you guys along for the ride here, doing that as well. So in the meantime, have a safe week, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll leave you with the opening for this evening. So take care, everyone. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I forgot about our show and tell segment. I don't want to leave you guys hanging on that. My goodness, I would just pull my hair out. Okay, really quick, really quick. So I do have something for our show and tell. One thing I like to do on the show here this evening. So I always like talking about merchandise that I would love to see back in the sport again. And one thing that always comes up to me is when they make die casts of these old transporters here. One thing here that I think is different, and I think that really works, especially if you have kind of limited space. I miss these little micro machine transporters here. And of course, this one is a 1/144th scale one of Jerry Nadeau's transporter. And of course, with Sears Point coming up this weekend, I definitely want to feature the number 13 car that he started outside pole in 1998. So we have that here as well. And yes, this does have a little car on the inside of that as well. Boom. There you go. So yeah, I think these are pretty neat. I mean, they make it. I mean, this is obviously a 1998 edition. There were other ones they made earlier, Racing Champions produced, that have like larger proportions, and the cars more like Micro Machine size. But yeah, a lot of fun. If you ever check these out, I mean, I would bet that if you sold these, a lot of these things these days, if you sold these, this is like the size of a Pez dispenser, basically. You can tell from here, but it's still got the ramp and everything. That would be a really cool thing for them to bring back again. So there's your show and tell segment, and that'll do it for the show. So now we're going to wrap up for this week, and I will see you after Sears Point. Take care, everyone. We're going to do the intro all over again. Won't that be fun?